Before I talk about A Course in Miracles and what A Course in Miracles is and what it means to me, it would be only fair to say right from the outset that everything that I describe to you is entirely subjective. A Course in Miracles for me has been wholly transformative in my life. It has become the one true resource and only resource that I work with and would ever refer another person to in all truth. Although of course there are many fantastic resources in the world of its nature, but A Course in Miracles is in absolute truth the most important thing in my life by far. No thing is more useful for me in the world than this resource and what this resource extends into and leads into, which is everything else and most other resources. It is something quite special. A Course in Miracles was released in 1976, and I have only found it a few years ago. I didn't know about it at all in my life, and like many of the great works, they come to you at the right time, even though they might have been around forever. And A Course in Miracles was that. I could say that at any other time in my life, if I had have read it, I would not have connected to it as I did when it was brought into my life at the perfect time, of course. And so I would hazard a guess that if you are watching this video and you have made it all the way to this point in the video, that there may be something in it for you, and that something in the book is calling you to look a little further and explore what it's about. And it is my great pleasure, above pretty much all other pleasures, to tell you in my own words what it is about. First and foremost, it is about God. And it is about God and the Christ, the one Son of God, and the expression in the form of Jesus. And as Jesus walked this earth and did what Jesus did, or should I say, did what Christ does, did what Christ is, and operated according to the conditions of Christ, not according to the conditions of Jesus, although there was a man, and I'm sure his name was Jesus. But if you were to speak to Jesus, Jesus from a biblical and intuitive viewpoint would largely and consistently redirect you away from himself, in the sense of, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me, don't look to me. The miracles are not of me. And there is a crucial distinction in that to everyone in the world you may see a man, and that man's name is Jesus, but that man as you see him is not operating according to the conditions of a man. He is operating according to the conditions of the kingdom, to the conditions of heaven, to the conditions of spirit, and his acts and his manner, and most importantly his fruits in the world, are evidence of his conditions that he works according to, and that is not of man. For we see benefits of supernatural nature, even altruistic acts are almost superhuman in comparison to others at the time. He was truly something else, or at least as he was in this space. And by the fruits we do know the Christ energy in the world, of which Jesus manifests in this space as a conscious human. And yes, of course, he was a conscious human, or he was a human, but he was also aware and wholly awake to what we are. And I think that is really key to understand, regardless of the history of Jesus and whether he died on a cross or not. Whatever you happen to believe, what is most true about Jesus for the world today is the parable that we know. And we all know the parable and we all know the story. And so I guess when I'm referring to Jesus, I am doing so in full awareness and conscious awareness of the negligible histories around it. But the story of Jesus is pretty clear. That one is pretty consistent, regardless of the truth of the history of it. And so I'm referring to that, and I'm referring to the Jesus that you know based on the stories that you know, and that's what I'm referring to. And you need to understand before I say any more that the reason why that is relevant and important, as much different to, if not more so, than actual history, and I'm not discrediting history, but it is the world's story. It is the world's single lens view. The parable is the almost united story of the man Jesus. And so regardless of the historical details, we have a united story with embedded meaning, purpose, function, and context. We're all basing it around the same thing. And so I'm connecting to the common story, just to explain and just to show you why that is still important. Because the common story, regardless of history, has the lessons that are available for you to learn or not. And if you are to learn them, you will receive the fruits of those lessons. And what is really evident is that by the utter lack of fruit in the world today, we haven't really learnt the lesson of what Jesus was trying to do and trying to say. And that Christianity, after 2,000 or whatever years, really didn't get it right either. A Course in Miracles, in my opinion, is the one true resource. And I am referring to that in the context of the Bible. And before anyone has an issue with me sounding like I have an issue with the Bible, I do not. I've attempted to read the Bible on many occasions, very sincerely and from the heart, because I want to know, and it's the good book, and it's the book of God, it's the one true book. Like, I get it, it's not lost on me. But I can't read it. I've gotten barely 10 pages into it, and it's lost on me. And I find the language style hard. That's true, but it's mostly just, it is not the truth as I know it to be the truth. It doesn't ring of truth. It doesn't express truth. It doesn't convey messages that are ultimately trying to convey a knowing of truth. It has an entirely different flavour to what I know personally. And so to me, I've always struggled with the Bible, and particularly of late when I have given it my very best go, because I wanted to know what I was missing, and now I really understand what I was missing in it, or what is missing in it for me, in terms of a wholesome and meaningful connection to God in a very real way. I know why the book was deficient for me. And I can tell you why A Course in Miracles was, for me, the Bible of Bibles. It led me directly to God. It introduced me via Christ with reference to Jesus only. It introduced me directly to God. It was a shortcut of shortcuts. It was exactly what the Bible is meant to be. It is meant to be the one true doorway into God, into heaven. And to me, the Bible was never that. But I knew that's what I wanted. A Course in Miracles to me is the true Bible. And that's a pretty bold statement. And I can articulate to you why I say that and why that is true. And true in that there is evidence and fruits of the truth of this more than the other. What you need to understand about the parable of Jesus and remember about the parable of Jesus is that Jesus was hung on a cross. And over time, Jesus being hung on the cross was made an obsolete act. See, we believe that Jesus was crucified and died and then came back to life, that he was resurrected. And so, rolling with that story for the moment, there are two distinct parts to the final chapter of that story, in that he was crucified and killed, and then he arose, and then he was alive again and arose to heaven. Now I want you just to consider both of those elements that are as true as each other in the book and in the basis of the religion. We know that that is true. We know that the resurrection occurred following the crucifixion. We know that the story did not end in him being killed, and that was it. It ended in a very different context, in a different light, and therefore with a different meaning to the story. You need to appreciate that if the story had have ended in the second last chapter with the death and the crucifixion, that the message of that would be man over God, that man will dominate and can succeed over the will of God, and anyone extending the will of God wholly. It would end in a world of disorder and chaos. It would end in a world of mistrust and a lack of faith in God. It would end in a world where largely people turned their back on God and the idea of God, and most certainly the key expressions of God being religion. People would turn their backs on all of it. People would not trust those in positions of authority. People would feel inherently judged, as if there were laws and rules that they were to answer to, where persecution was the punishment. I'd like you to have a feel for the social human world that we know. It doesn't feel that dissimilar to that. It feels and appears very much in a hierarchical system of authority and authoritative order, with the consequences of punishment. It is godless. It is anchored upon different principles, values, and wants. We are anchored upon materiality. We are anchored upon our life cycle and being comfortable, having, and doing well. God is an afterthought or an add-on. Rarely these days is God-centric, because that is the message of the Bible, and that is the message that Christianity over 2,000 years has perpetuated around the globe, and that is unquestionable for 2,000 years. You can see it today, and it is why we as a society are largely where we are today, with religion and with that particular religion. But that is not what happened. According to the parable, Jesus did not die. According to the parable, the crucifixion didn't take. It didn't work. Effectively, there was no crucifixion. Jesus said, I can't die. Jesus said, I am eternal, and I am of my Father. If that was remembered, and the demonstration of proof was presented before the world as it was demonstrated as proof, then that message was not about Jesus alone, as anything Jesus said was not about Jesus. It was about man. It was about all people. He is of, and the message is of us, and we know that. We get a little too wrapped up in Jesus, and we forget that he is the holy expression of Christ, of course in the form of a man with a name, but we know that that is not the truth of the matter. That is not what was going on, and that is not what happened. That is not what Jesus ever claimed, and the Bible itself will tell you so from start to finish. And so let us hypothesize that Christianity wholly recognized the truth of the actual whole story, and we reignited and conditioned the final chapter, and okay, so now that is the learning. And so for 2,000 years, all of mankind knew God, knew our eternal place in heaven with God, knew the conditions of the kingdom applied to us and not of this world. The conditions of heaven were primary, this world was secondary, and was unto the effect of the conditions of the kingdom as we allowed it within ourselves and extended it of ourselves into the world by virtue of transformation, exactly as Jesus did and said, do as I do. Can you imagine? There would be no authority, there would be no persecution, there would be no laws and rules outside of internal common sense and a knowing of order and love. Really think about how different it would be if the religion of Christianity was wholly anchored upon the truth of our place in God, and it was expressed as such in a day-to-day functional way around the world, and had been that for 2,000 years. Imagine that just a peaceful light had quietly perpetuated the globe over 2,000 years. Because to fully appreciate the final chapter of that story leads to nothing else. It leads to the simple and whole conclusion that we are of God, and God is true, and God is present in our life, and our world is the presence of God. It is what we are. This is A Course in Miracles. This is what A Course in Miracles teaches, in words of a similar nature to those that I'm sharing with you now. A Course in Miracles is the book of the resurrection. It is the book of the very last chapter, which proclaims the goodness of God, and who and where we are, and what we are and have always been and will never change. A Course in Miracles explains in the clearest ways how to understand why our world is not of that now, how you have forgotten this, yet still know it, how your world is working in accordance to your unremembering and alters and transforms before your eyes, literally, in accordance with your remembering. A Course in Miracles is the clearest, simplest guidebook to God. It is exactly what you would have sincerely and wholly hoped the Bible to be if your heart is on the trajectory of going home and of reconnecting to Source or God. The word is God. And A Course in Miracles will, if nothing else, assist you to become wholly comfortable with the word of the Father, and the word Father and the word God, and that will sink deeply within your heart in ways that will evaporate all of your little triggers around religion and Christianity, around patriarchy and dominant masculinity, around authority and your authority problem, everything to do with that idea. Many people, from my experience, will hit a number of challenges when exploring A Course in Miracles as a resource. One, of course, is that it is wholly inclusive of, yet almost wholly dismisses the current contemporary message of Christianity as it stands. It is Christianity without the glasses. It's Christianity without the mud. It is wholly Christianity. And so many from a church background or from a gospel-oriented background will have some troubles with A Course in Miracles and the glory of all of us that it inherently proclaims is true, of which the Bible says you basically need to earn, and that you've done bad. A Course in Miracles says that it is an illusion that you've done bad. Anyone, I guess, who has experienced male dominance and masculine or patriarchal dominance in their life, again, possibly to do with the church, but also just to do in their own life, will often hit walls around references to the Father and the Son. He. There's a lot of he references, references to man, all of that sort of stuff. And so I've met a number of people that have also hit walls around that stuff, and they just can't quite get past the gender orientations to the language of that, and so often can't continue with the resource because they've hit those sort of walls. And again, other people really just find the resource too confronting, because as I said right at the start, it is truly a shortcut of shortcuts. For me, it is the one true resource to God, and there is no two-step dance going on. This is one step, and it is the one resource in the one step. And a lot of people find that very confronting when, in very tangible ways, the world as you see it and perceive it begins to quite literally evaporate and disintegrate before your eyes into the light. That can be quite confronting. And so A Course in Miracles is, I guess, not, it is to be taken lightly, but it is also in recognition of what it is that you truly want. There are many, many modalities and belief systems and pathways up the mountain, and they all sincerely have something to offer, of course, because they are all of the mountain and therefore equal in what it is that they can offer, but they are only individual paths or reflections of the whole. It is rare to find a resource that does not ignore yet bypasses wholly all other paths to take you immediately to Source in one movement, in one whole choice, and explains in very practical terms how to understand how that is possible, and beyond how it is possible, that more than anything else in your life, that's what you want. That more than anything else in your life, you want God. And you're looking for God in everything. And you first started looking for God exactly where people told you God was. And that was in the book or the building or in the belief system. And so, of course, that was your experience and impression of God. and I would imagine it wasn't a really great one. And so that was your first experience of God, which may have been fanciful and sounded like utter rubbish. It might have been very domineering and very bullying. It might have been outright abusive. It might have just all been a joke to you. It doesn't really matter what your reaction was. I imagine that your first reaction to God via his translators in the world put you off. And so from that moment, any experience that you had to do with God simply reinforced the quality of the translators, of course, as you determined to be God, because they know God. It really does make a lot of sense in how that happens. It makes perfect sense, really. But the tragedy of that event is beyond your comprehension. It is truly beyond your comprehension. Because in that moment, you walked away, you turned your back on God, and you said, I want something else. God is silly, God is not for me, God is dangerous, God is a joke, whatever, any of it. You chose that God wasn't for you, based on what you saw. But you didn't realise that you didn't not want God. You just didn't realise that was the problem with the translators. Of course you didn't realise that. But this is the tragedy of tragedies, that you turned your back on the one thing that, quite honestly, you have spent the rest of your life looking for and trying to regain through everything else that you've done. It truly is the meaning of meanings and the reason why you do everything, the ultimate reason of reasons. It's your trajectory, it's where you're trying to get to. The state of God, which is a state of neutrality and peace and grace and relaxedness beyond your comprehension. There is no conflict, and it is a state of wholeness or oneness. That is what you want, and that is what you are ultimately trying to get out of every relationship, experience, event, environment, you name it. You're wanting to feel that pace of peace, and you're wanting it now, but you're believing that you can't have it now. And the Bible did that to you, because the Bible and Christianity, in terms of the message of the parable, and that they ended at the second last chapter, says that you don't deserve it and that you must pay for it, that you must earn it. There are people above you or ahead of you. You must pay penance. There's some sort of payment system. You've got to do something. You've got to earn it. And so in the meantime, you're no good. You are undeserving. You are unearned. You are unqualified and unworthy. And it's very unclear what it is you need to do to go straight back into God's good graces. Because according to man, you haven't found the way yet because you haven't achieved it. And so of course you got put off all of that stuff. Like, of course you dismissed God. But goodness me, it is what you want. A connection to God is what you want. And I can say from my heart that A Course in Miracles is the one resource that is able to wholly offer you that without anything else, without steps, without payment, without exchange, without a time delay, without having to wait for a teacher. It is just all presented to you here. It is the keys to the kingdom, and when you realise it's in your hand, you look up and the gates are there and you're ready to go. Like, it's really up to you. I could talk about this holy resource all day. It is my true joy and my true pleasure to share it with everyone, in whatever form. Of course, A Course in Miracles is a book, and you can find that book everywhere. But it's also an audio resource, and for 23 and a half hours, listening to the course read to you by Jim Stewart is nothing short of God, honey. It is the most exquisitely beautiful thing, and I had never really listened to audio books before, A Course in Miracles, and now I only listen to it. And it is the mantra of my day. It plays pretty much 24 hours a day, in my car, on my phone, or just in my head. I think my inner dialogue now is in the tone of Jim Stewart. I hear it all day long. It is truly like prayer beads for me, and it is because of the joy that it brings. It is because of the holy joy that it brings. I think about it 24 hours a day. I'm in it 24 hours a day. I utterly adore it. I love the resource. I want to give it to everybody. I feel that it has given me a bag of shortcuts to God, and once you have them, you can't give them away fast enough. You don't know what to do with them. You just want to give them to everybody, you know. And that is what inspires me to offer A Course in Miracles to you. And so I would invite you to join me on a journey home. At the end of March, we will be starting the Course in Miracles journey together, and it will be for 6 months, and it will be relatively intensive. There will be no cost, and anybody is welcome to join us. Stay in touch with us via the home group, or if you haven't joined our home group yet, get in contact with us personally or via Aeon Soul, and we can connect you to our home space. That is a Facebook group where we do all of our work and learning and our basic communications around all of this stuff, and it's where we will be delivering the introduction to Course in Miracles and the journey of A Course in Miracles together with me. So if you're interested in exploring this resource and are sincere about reconnecting and finding your way back to peace and clarity and light and love, join me, and we will go on a journey together in 2019 that could transform your life and will certainly transform your world, guaranteed. Blessings. I look forward to hearing from you and joining you very soon at the end of March. I'll speak to you guys soon.